So it is 6:15. I will open tonight's meeting of the Capital Planning Committee, Wednesday, December 14, 2022, in the Ritter Building Lower Conference Room. In accordance with the requirements of the open meeting law, please be advised that this meeting is being recorded and may be broadcast live over the Lunenburg Public Access channel, on Facebook Live on the Public Access Facebook page, and it will be uploaded to the Lunenburg Access YouTube channel within 24 hours after the meeting's conclusion. With regrets, there is no remote Zoom meeting for tonight's meeting. The agenda lists all topics which may be discussed at the meeting and are those reasonably anticipated by the chair. Votes may be taken as a result of these discussions. Not all items listed may in fact be discussed, and items not listed may also be brought up for discussion to the extent permitted by the open meeting law. In attendance tonight we have committee members Mr. Beardmore, Mr. Passios, Mr. Martin, and Mr. Brenner, and myself as chair. Any public comment from the Capital Planning Committee members this evening?
Yeah, I have a comment.
Mr. Beardmore.
Last night there was some discussion at the select board meeting pertaining to the parking lot item. And there was speculation around the Kids Kingdom playground adjacent to the planned parking lot, and lots of quotes about the political expediency of moving Kids Kingdom to accommodate a parking lot. I don't think that it's as clear as certainly everyone sitting at that table last night thinks it is, because again, as I've said multiple times in this meeting, there's a parallel process going on in town around the municipal buildings and the facilities. And part of what is happening through that process, part of their scenarios, would diminish the school department's ability to drive programming around extended day, potentially around preschool and preschool education and childcare, and also sports programs and activities that happen in the evenings. Because if we move extended day into the gymnasiums in the primary school in Turkey Hill, then we can't program into the early evening to do basketball and volleyball and those types of events, particularly during the winter months. So a suggestion has been made that perhaps we look at what we can do to accommodate other programs through building new, more efficient buildings in lieu of the gymnasium space that we're going to be giving up. And whether that's a school department activity or ultimately a parks department activity or a town activity, TBD, but right now the school department delivers a lot of these services. And one of the ideas that's been floated around, discussed at the school committee meetings and has been floated to the building committee is potentially building new gymnasium space, either to the north of TC Passios or to the west of TC Passios, depending upon what happens with TC Passios. So I just want to throw that out there. Again, not to say that this should happen or will happen, but I think that it's a reasonable suggestion that needs to be tossed in the mix with all the other suggestions. And I don't think that it is appropriate right now to say, well, that space between Kids Kingdom and TC Passios is free space and we can do whatever we want with it. Because I think that there's a lot of consideration around programming relevant to the municipal building process that needs to take place. And I'm just throwing that out there because I don't, the other thing that I'm not clear on is exactly who controls that space. Because as I stated at our last meeting, the lot plan that the town manager provided that shows the design and layout of the new proposed parking lot references a survey that draws a line basically right along the eastern edge of Kids Kingdom and leaves that parcel that includes TC Passios and the rest of the school department property to the school department. So again, that it's not 100% sure in my mind, but I'm more than 50% sure that is school department property right now. So anyway, point being made, I don't think it's just a layup political decision to move that playground. I think that there's a lot of consideration that needs to happen before such a decision is made.
Yeah, I think your characterization of where that comment came from, what the political aspect of it is taken out of context, but it's not to the point of anything that has to do with the capital planning.
Well, it does, because it's very relevant to the parking lot that I think we're going to discuss a little bit tonight.
Well, we're going to discuss it, but again, anyway, when it comes up, we'll discuss it then. Any other public comment from the committee members? Any public comment from the public?
Is this the time when you would like to discuss the parking lot? You're gonna wait till we get to that?
Oh, well, yeah, I mean, I don't see why you could do that in a public comment. We'll do that second, after we do your Collins score review update.
No public comment then?
So, any public comment? No. Any public comment? No. Okay. So, on to the core item agenda of the evening, discussion of the capital planning requests and prioritization. So first, the town manager had provided some Collins score review updates that I believe I have captured on this sheet. So these are the new Collins scores. If you want to, Madam Town Manager, explain why there was revisions to some of these.
Yes, so when I started, I split out the cemetery projects, created that, accordingly. And then I started looking at some of the others where they didn't, the values didn't add up to what was allowed for that category. So there were discrepancies in numbers. So for instance, there were some that had a 8 instead of or a 3 instead of a 5, like the most, you could get a 5 or a 0, and there was a 3 or a 4 in some categories. So those were pretty apparent. And then looking at some of the other projects and how people filled them out, they filled them out a little differently. And trying to create more of a uniform approach to and more objective approach to all the categories and criteria. So if you have any particular questions, I can try to answer by project.
As I entered them, there was probably, I don't know, 40% of them got new numbers. Some of them very close.
Did the calculation, because you said it was 45 of the cells and there were 510 cells. It's only 8%.
Okay. Well, I didn't say of how many cells. I mean, just that column is only 30 column. That's only 30 entries in the column, and there were probably about 8 to 9 to at least 10 changes. So at least 30% of them were changed. Anyway, it's kind of irrelevant, and most of them were not huge changes. They were plus or minus 2 or something. The only one that really changed, if I remember correctly, was the fact that the cemetery, because it got split into 2. So one of them got rated much higher, much
2
different
points
than the other.
higher.
Yeah. So does anybody have any questions about the Collins scores?
So, can you just refresh me? How does this scoring? How do you understand the scoring on this? The higher the number, the more relevant.
The
It's like a test. So the higher you score, the more urgent it is, the better it is.
Which is exactly the opposite of the prioritization that we just did.
Right. Well, those are the prioritization we're doing is ranking.
Yeah.
So, like in school, you want to rank number 1 as the better students down to the bottom. But in the score of people who need attention, this would be the inverse. So, students who got high Collins score need the most attention.
Okay. Thank you.
I'll tell you honestly,
I'm sure I'm going to get letters now. Please get letters.
I don't foresee a way forward for me to be on this committee next year. But I personally would rather see this list generated initially in the order of the column scores and just have a department column as to which department it's associated with.
Yeah, we can do that.
Because, I don't know, I just don't like it this way, because then we start reordering with our prioritization and we don't see what the column score says it should have been, how it should have lined up, and then we go and.
Well, we can, I
I
have
mean,
the
it can
ability
be
to
done.
do this right now, if you wanna see these
No,
items.
that's okay, it's in my head
But
now, so.
I tend to agree with you, Dave. I think that would be helpful just in going through the ranking process. It would be conceptually helpful. As I said last week, I did rely on the column scores
For the
pretty
last-
heavily in that last third.
Yep.
So I did find it helpful just in terms of rationalizing where things should ultimately land in certain categories in my head. I have a question and then a comment. My question is really for the town manager, what led to the need to redo this? Was it new people in the roles, or was it the numerical changes that we had to make to make it conform to Munis, or?
For the correction?
Yeah, I mean, aside from the cemetery one, which is fairly obvious, I understand
And
that.
noticing that there were apparent errors in people filling.
Yeah,
them
well,
out.
I guess that's what I'm
Yeah,
getting to is.
and then I started digging deeper and saw that there were some ratings that shouldn't have been rated that way.
So it was a closer look, basically.
Yeah.
Okay, so fair enough. So that's something that maybe we could learn from next year.
So did I understand correctly, and I'm gonna get the numbers wrong, but in a particular category, you had a choice of it either earned 0 points or 5 points, and somebody typed in 3 points.
Right.
Okay,
There were
okay, so it was the way it
instances
was,
of that.
the way the scoring was
Right.
filled out.
Yeah.
So my request would be that next year, whether I'm on this committee or whoever it is, it would be helpful to make sure that the column scores are solid from the get-go, because it doesn't inform us too much on the last, unless there is another meeting, presumably the last meeting of ours, to have a revision when all of us have gone through the ranking already. So I'm sure you know that, so it would be helpful if the staff, and we looked at those and they got better instructions about filling that.
I don't think it's the instruction, I think it may be helpful to be part of the committee's process to look at those numbers, because they have instructions to fill them out, but they may, interpret it a little slightly differently. They may think, oh, this has an educational value when it really doesn't. So I think for the committee to do that review on top of them filling it out.
We certainly could do that. I think a lot of that there's going to be lots of discussion and debate about whether
Yeah.
something has educational value or not.
My only ask would be that the reasoning is consistent, right? So, and as you go through it with the department heads, and you see something that you believe is out of whack, as you did, recently, that there's a discussion just to make whatever the rationale is consistent from one rater to another. As you're dealing with multiple raters, I tend to think that this could be a massive time suck for the committee.
How do they fill out these numbers? Like physically, are they sent an Excel sheet that they
It's all
plug?
through software.
Does the software,
Is it ClearGov now we're doing?
Yes,
So it's a-
that's the
okay.
platform.
does it validate the answers they put in against what's actually in, like, we talk about some of them being as simple as they typed in 3 when it should have been 5, for example. Does it validate, like, these are the values this could actually be answered with?
No, because it will, so there's a range. It was 0 to 10 was the range, and so you can't do it per question.
Oh.
It's the range for all of the categories.
Oh, bummer. Okay,
Right.
thank you.
So then I'm missing,
But it-
I'm misunderstanding.
But it had directions on each one, say, like the headings, age of the asset to be replaced, over reasonable equals 8 points. So if you're filling out over reasonable, you should put in 8.
But-
So that.
We can't remove the human error
Yeah.
element that way then with data validation.
Right.
Okay.
I mean, this was a big leap from what we used to do with Excel, to go to the ClearGov platform.
Yeah, I don't mean this to sound critical, I'm trying to understand our limitations within the system we use, rather than saying, why aren't we, because I'm sure there's good reasons we're doing it the way we are.
Well, as a software person, which I assume you are.
Enough.
Okay, right. Well, as a software person myself, it's that it's not, you need validation. If these are gonna be standardized scores across a group of people filling it out, they need to, it is imperative that people not be able to fill it out wrong. So therefore, if you're asking them that if it's this, then you have to put in an 8, but except 7 or 8, then it's built incorrectly.
Right.
Because it's built that people can make mistakes, and that further hampers the process. What they should have is, it needs improvement in anything, and then in the back end, it calculates a score for you. So they should have descriptions in those cases. I'm using the example the town manager gave. But that's out of our control because we don't build it, this is something provided.
The other just commentary that, I think certainly we discussed in the last couple of meetings, and I think if we are, and for those of us who are here next year, I certainly hope to be, is I do think that we probably need to spend some time at the beginning of the process next year going through each of the Collins categories again and making a decision as to whether we think it's relevant or not. Because I gotta tell you, I've kind of come full circle on the third-party funding element. And I think that deserves, at least in and of itself, that particular area deserves some discussion. Because
Well, if we do that, we'd have to start earlier, and that's fine, we can
Yeah.
start in August and talk about before we give, we have to do it before we give
Yeah,
the request.
but I think that the value of those conversations, and there are probably other items in there that if I was looking at them right now would probably come right out at me, I think would ultimately help us to achieve greater consistency in our thinking during the rating process later on, right? Just kind of working through some of this reasoning. I mean, we got some stuff here that some of us are just kind of way out of whack with the rest of the committee. And I think it's just because our reasoning is different,
Right.
And if we had more time, which I'm not saying we should take more time at this point, but, if we put more time into it, I think there would probably be greater consistency later on.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be interesting to see what the variation of scores are, you could do that as a row, what the low and high was and what's the variation. But, there's a lot of ways to look at the data, and that's the beauty or ugliness of data, whichever you want to look at it as. But thank you for providing those in context. As I said to the town manager when these were provided, I don't think that any of these items, any of the changes would necessarily have influenced somebody changing to any great degree. Maybe you would go up a rank or down a rank. I don't think it would have done anything major to any of these, so.
I agree.
Okay, so now we come to, anybody else have anything on the Collins scores? Okay, so now we'll review the prioritization. So I have a funny hunch that some people in the audience want to discuss this particular item, so this would be the moment. And so, unless you want to wait till we get down to it, but I'm more than happy to entertain it now.
So, I'm Sue Doherty, the director at the Council on Aging, and this is Debbie Lincoln. She's the chairperson of the Council on Aging. And I just want to begin by saying I know that information on this parking lot has been very slow in coming. We just received word this afternoon from the engineering company that a cost estimator will be in the office Friday, and he'll work on the cost estimate for the larger parking lot and the associated site improvements. So I don't know what that means. I know tonight is the night for everything. So where do we go from here? And as you know, the facilities manager, who has been doing this Forrest is no longer with us,
Right.
and everything is very slow in coming to Heather and I from the engineering firm.
I'll open it up to the committee. I'd be more than happy to provide a first response, but
Can I add, I'll just add on to that. We did have a meeting with the engineer last week to follow up on the questions that the committee had. The 150,000 was an initial estimate, given the area of the parking lot. And that's when he said he'd go back and get a fine tune that cost. But it was supposed to be all inclusive of drainage, pavement, line striping, the guardrail, and pavement marking and landscaping, all associated work. So that was the intent from the beginning, but like Sue said, we're not gonna get that in time for tonight. The alternative that we discussed, because parking is such a priority for that area, is to add parking spaces along Memorial, extend them from where they presently exist in front of Kids Kingdom. And he again was gonna get a cost estimate for that.
So that would be past where the gate is?
Right, so it would require removal of that first gate, but leaving the second gate in place. But the benefit of added parking spaces along that road. Not to say we're gonna give up on the parking adjacent to the building, because I think that's important as well, especially proximity to the building. But it would have a benefit not only for the senior center, but also people attending Kids Kingdom, the library in cases, for extended parking, but.
So I vaguely recall at the time the two gates were put in, that some program, I don't know if it was extended day or something, were using that space, maybe it was even when the elementary school was functioning there, for like dodgeball and stuff like that on that paved area between those two gates. Do those kinds of activities happen there at all anymore, or does anybody know?
My office looks right at that area. The only thing I've seen happen there is a Zumba class that we held out there a couple of times in the fall. Otherwise, if there is Parks Department using that field over there, they might use it. I don't recall them using
But
it.
you don't see extended day out there?
Extended Day doesn't even use the playground. They're not allowed over there.
Okay.
I think it's a stranger danger type situation, and it's not a school
Yeah.
playground, so.
am I correct in assuming on that diagram that the white areas are the new spaces?
Yeah, I think there's, what, 9
9
spots
additional spots.
with removal of one tree. with-
It'd probably be a lot easier project, certainly.
Oh, absolutely.
And would,
And it's gonna give you.
it may not
one more-
diminish
one
a
more
future
parking.
project either, right? If we
Right.
were to move Kids Kingdom and/or put the parking lot where we're currently discussing, I think this work wouldn't be lost
Right.
if we did that.
Right. So my initial response to what you said, I don't know where that leaves us. So I will not speak for the rest of the members. They're all here. For myself, the fact that the data is incomplete and coming in late is exactly why I rated it low, or actually, I got talked in by the town manager not to unrate it. All right, so I just rated it the lowest, because we had this issue last year. There was things about the town beach building, and
That got pulled. It was the AC.
Right.
It was the AC.
right, it got pulled.
And the
Exactly,
AC.
because
was
we didn't have enough
at the
information.
bottom, 'cause we-
And this is another case, so it's not a matter of us, this is not an editorial board of saying yay or nay on the project. My position is it's just not ready for us to decide on, because we don't have the numbers to make the decision. So I've always been for a parking project there. I don't know that with the information I have, that I have enough information to make an educated ranking of this. And given that you have this alternative, which I think will not go to waste, so we could spend the money and the town could use the parking spots anyway, while something else is being done, gives us that time. So that's why I put it where I did. So I just don't want to, from my standpoint, I don't want this to be looked at as, oh, they don't want this project to be done. My answer would be, you'd have to add right now at the end of it.
Right.
Like, I just don't think it's ready to go forward right now.
So could it come back next year?
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, again, it's not dismissed with prejudice, it's just like, just not, you know, I don't think we have, that's why I'd rather unrate it than rate it low. Rating it low to me means that I think everything else is more important than it, and I think that's not accurate for what I would see.
Yeah, I take the ratings a little bit differently. I think a rating is a moment in time, and it is what it is, and I don't see it carrying forward or having any bearing on a future year. We've discussed in previous meetings, but just for your benefit, like, I view this as a priority, because, as you well know, me having sat on the finance committee the last 3 years, every time you come in, you talk about parking twice a year. So
Right.
we've heard it at least 6 times. Dave and I have over the course of the last few years, and I'm, sufficiently convinced, and I've driven by there during the day. I work from home. I, will go out during lunch, run by town hall, drop stuff off, pick stuff up, whatever. And everything you say is true, and those parking spaces that are closest to the building are clearly the premium spots. And there are more empty spots on the upper lot, and, and I understand, given the mobility issues that, a lot of your clientele has, this has to be figured out and prioritized. So I totally get it. I think that the challenge we have here is some of the issues around the property that we could spend all night talking about,
Exactly.
and the cost. So that, the other piece here is, we're, with the current plan, or the plan prior to this, was you gain 14 and then you lose 6. So it's a net gain of 8 spots. Granted, they're arguably a little bit closer to the building, but, by a matter of probably a few
Well,
feet.
with the revamped rec area, everything is going to be brought down like 7 feet to be level with the building, so there'll be access to that back door.
Yeah.
So, and we only have 2 legitimate handicap spots in the whole lot, which is prime real estate right now for people arriving at 7:30 in the morning to get them when we open at 8.
And I would foresee with the rec area that we would hopefully have a lot more use for the building and for the town to use the rec area. We have a pavilion in there. I could foresee band concerts happening there, other civic events happening there. And we have our Memorial Day exercises. I can see things happening there. This is going to be, hopefully, with our new pavilion and our new back area, patio area, a much more used area in town. So I think that the parking situation is going to be more of a problem.
It's not going to naturally get better on its own.
No, it's going to get worse.
So
if
what is the
anything.
capacity of the building? What is it rated for? How many people could be in the building?
It's in separate rooms. There's like the large function room, if you had those large round tables, I believe it's 81 people. If you have it like stadium seating, it's closer to 100. The front section, the older section, that's definitely has changed because there's a pool table in there now.
No, by the fire code, the code of the building,
Yeah.
what is the maximum capacity?
That was it right there. That's what we have.
So 100,
Yeah.
okay. And how many spots are available that are
In the
considered?
parking,
Yeah,
there's 2 handicap spots, and I believe there's 8 regular spots. 8, no more than 9.
so the lot that's between the Eagle House and the
Teen
and the
Center,
Boys and
yeah.
Girls Club, it's not considered a parking lot for that building?
We use it as, the teen center uses half of it, and
Right.
we use the other half. We parked the van up there, and we had an Eagle Scout build that ramp
Yep.
that was handicap accessible, ADA compliable at the time, which it no longer is, because they change the specs on that all the time. I mean, even the little cement ramps on the back door that come into the back of the building don't comply anymore. So,
Well, I don't comply with new code.
Right,
You can still
exactly.
continue to use them.
But, and the 2 handicap spots that are up above are not correct either, so.
Well, I will take this opportunity to opine something outside of the capital planning committee and just say it's really problematic that ever since I got involved with town, and that's many years now, more than I can want to count, that we cannot, like, we have not been able to solve parking in this town. And every year it's the same thing. It's like, we don't have enough parking. It doesn't matter, choose a building, we don't have enough parking. We can't get in town hall, we don't have enough parking. And of course, town hall has no property around it, that makes it more difficult. This one I see an avenue potentially, because there is town-owned property around it, depending on what those uses are. And hopefully we get to do that, especially since it's not a lot. 100, capacity of 100, you know, I don't think that means 100 cars. I think probably it means, you know, at 50 spaces or something of that nature.
And I mean, I think if you were to total all the spaces that are in that lot and sort of what I would call a mezzanine lot between the
Boys and Girls Club.
Boys and Girls Club and the Eagle House, and then you take the street parking, there's probably 40 or more spaces all told. I mean, the problem is proximity to the building.
Right.
Getting close to the building.
Right.
That, in my mind, that's the real challenge that we have to solve for. If I go to an event there, I don't park in front of the building, I park usually in front of the teen center because
That's right.
somebody else can park down there, right? But those are, you know, those events that I go there are few and far between, right? So although I understand I do not qualify, but,
Well, parking is an issue with many buildings, like I said. Obviously, it's of particular importance to the senior center because of, obviously, that's, you know, a group of people that have the most
yeah.
mobility issues, so.
I mean, we have, like I said, the 2 legit handicap parking spots in the lower lot, the prime real estate there. There's other people who don't have handicap placards that are handicapped, and they have mobility issues. And those few spots are taken up like that immediately. And
So-
then they're on the street.
So let me ask the town manager a question that I don't think she'll answer, but I'll ask it. This proposed Plan B or alternate plan, is this something that we could potentially do in the next year without a capital?
Without
Item.
it being in the capital plan?
Yeah, I mean, between
with a-
chapter 90 and DPW and, you know, we're adding 50 grand a year to roads, like, this doesn't look like a major job to
Right.
square this off a little bit.
Yeah, number one, I want the estimate back.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Like I
then
said,
I
didn't
would
expect
have,
an answer.
but we could look at other resources.
The other thing I want to note that, you know, and I don't know that it's ever been addressed or even how to address it necessarily if it's precluded by bylaw or policy. But we're talking about the capital plan comes up and we meet during budget season for the annual town meeting. But there's nothing that I know of that says that we can't have a capital article in a special town meeting.
Oh, we have.
We just did one.
Yeah,
Right.
like,
So it's not like you have to wait a whole year. If this alternative comes back with a pricing, and it's like, oh, this is, you know, this is doable, and through the town manager and the finance director, they say we have the money to do it, you don't have to wait till next May. Hopefully we can do it in November of next year. So it's
Yeah.
not like you're waiting a whole year.
What's the vote required for that, though?
it depends on the funding source.
Right.
Oh, that's,
Um,
because I know some have a much more stringent requirement than
The
others.
special town meeting has a more stringent
Yeah.
requirement for any appropriations. But if it were just a regular raise and appropriate at town meeting, it's just a majority vote.
And of course, the elephant in the room is there's still the ARPA funding. So if you got the numbers after we approved this and you went to the Board of Selectmen and said you want to add this item to the list of things to consider using the ARPA funding, depending on the pricing, that could happen too. And then we could hear all the members say how they always support it.
I just want to speak very quickly to say that I would 100% echo the gross majority of what I've heard already said by Mr. Alonso and Mr. Beardmore in terms of understanding the pressing need for parking and not wanting to make it wait, but by the same token, needing to understand more both of the cost and I would really want to personally understand the long-term intended use for all of that land in the area, because we talk about potentially moving Kids Kingdom. Not necessarily a bad idea, but then we start to move it towards TC Passios. What is the long-term fate of TC Passios in the surrounding land? Are we building a parking lot that could ultimately throw a monkey wrench in some grander design that could be benefiting the whole community in a different way? Which is why I had it last time on the list as well, but not out of a lack of desire for parking at the senior center.
Right. I think there's some confusion about the moving of Kids Kingdom also. It's not picking up the whole Kids Kingdom and moving it down. It's taking like a quarter of it and flipping it to the other side.
Well, to be clear,
To the backside.
that was discussed at some length.
Right.
And part of the questions that we wanted to ask was,
Who's paying?
you know, when we were taking that $150,000, it really wasn't clear, like, because it was based on a swag, based on square footage.
Right.
And that's a unique area, so the drainage is probably atypical, the fencing is probably atypical, the need to move playground equipment and re-landscape is probably atypical. So in my mind, it was like, well, a swag based on square footage, given the unique situation that that area is in, I would want to know that, because honestly, the number came before we even got the conceptual design. So it's very clear the order of events, which just leads me to believe that that $150,000 is not a reliable number. Relative to the Kids Kingdom piece itself, though, yes, we could move the telephone thing and the other apparatus that's right there to the back, and it'd probably be a minimal cost, I would imagine. In fact, the DPW could probably do it. There was some discussion about, okay, well, if we're gonna go through the effort of putting a single lane and 14 spaces, should we do a single lane with parking on the other side and just move the whole thing so that we can get 28 spaces instead of 14? Obviously at a higher cost. But, you know, would it make sense to do that all at once, or would it make better sense to do that in state? So that's what,
Right.
like,
No, I
the
understand.
moving Kids Kingdom discussion really got kind of blown up as we started to dig into it.
Yeah, I mean,
And if you heard that there was a new idea, or maybe a resurrection of an old idea, at the select board meeting last night about potentially making Memorial Drive a one-way street, and then use diagonal parking on one side of the road where you get a whole lot more parking for the whole road. So that's actually an interesting idea. It's a small road, it doesn't have any homes on it. It would not necessarily severely impact the road.
I'm sorry, it has a lot of traffic, it has a lot of foot traffic from the kids when they get out of school. Coming around that dog leg by the library, and I mean, there's a gate up for a reason, I would expect, is so people don't go flying down there through the school parking lot. And when I come into work every morning, up that corner, if those gates are open, let's say for voting or something, they're flying through there. There's a stop sign there, and they don't stop. So it's, and the kids, even though there's sidewalks, they're all over the place. We have the seniors trying to get in and out. I think, you know, parallel parking on the street.
That's a parallel parking. Angle.
Angle parking, it's just, I mean, even right now, it's bad with the boulders on the side of the road that were moved a bit, but they're still there, so it's tight, it's very tight.
Yeah, but that's both sides of the street, that's the problem.
No, they only park
They
on
only
one
park on
side
the
of
far
the
side.
street.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
It was an interesting suggestion.
I think it's an excellent suggestion.
I-
Everything that you just mentioned is in a hazardous condition now, So is making it one way more hazardous? I gotta believe at least it keeps it the same.
Yeah.
But that's another alternative at least to consider.
People backing out, you're suggesting coming in parallel, that means everybody's backing out all the time?
Yeah,
Is
in the
that
one-way
correct?
traffic, basically, yeah.
Yeah,
It could be,
I think that.
Ultimately, the
I
best,
think that's not,
the best and the permanent solution would be to have the double-sided parking lot next to the senior
Right.
center. However you accomplish that is how you accomplish it. That's the best-case scenario. It needs to be, in my eyes, close to the building. It's a waste of money to put any spaces or any number of spaces or a lot of money into spaces that are not directly adjacent to the building with ADA direct access to the building. That's been my claim right from the beginning, and, you know, a number of years ago when this was looked at,
But this is, so, but those spaces right there that connect to a sidewalk and we can make an accessible ramp right on.
yeah,
this
but
curb.
I just wanted to make one other comment. This, again, these spaces cross the so-called political boundary that was talked about before. So you're going onto school property also with these spaces, so what does that add into the conversation? Not that I have a problem with it either way, it's just that everybody's concerned about that
Yeah.
so-called delineation of care and custody, yet this one, it just blows right over it and nobody's talking about it. So I'm just bringing it up.
I think it's a good point. I don't think it's quite the level of impedance on the property that the other discussion was.
And based on this, and I've walked that property a dozen times, you could take Kids Kingdom and shift the whole thing diagonally back into that property and get the space you need for
Well,
a
that's-
parking lot.
That's been my point from day one,
Right.
exactly that point.
And
But-
that's why.
But that's political.
I'd love to fund it if it was a project that had a full design
Right.
and backing of more than, no, I'll withdraw that, because there's support for a parking lot, just not in the form that it exists right now. I think there's huge support for it.
Can I go back to the care and custody part, because it was a town meeting vote that transferred a delineated piece of property, including the TCP and the Brooks, to the select board at town meeting. So I don't know where that conversation
Right.
is about, boundaries. That is
And a
under the care and custody of the.
And the prior select board offered that land to a select.
I recall that.
Yeah, and there was no outcry about you don't have the authority to do that. Nobody said
I
that.
recall that. I'm just going by literally the letter of the survey that
Right.
is referenced in the plan that you provided.
Right.
One other,
And the, what do you call the online map?
The
GIS.
GIS.
The GIS still refers to that as one contiguous property. So to my knowledge, it has not been subdivided.
Right, that was a step that wasn't taken after town meeting. And I think the survey work was done as part of the last TCP Building Design Committee work that the engineer did. So
And the
that was a
engineers-
piece that needed to get done before
Yeah.
it got separated out and recorded.
right, and I don't remember if it was the engineers or town council that had an opinion that basically there's no real need to do that unless the town is gonna give up ownership of the property.
Right.
So why spend the money if the town's gonna own it, whether it be the school or the board of selectmen? That was the comment that,
That's the moral equivalent of saying, okay, we're gonna pass a bylaw at town meeting, but we're not gonna send it in to the Attorney General or
I
have it
agree.
added to the
I
bylaws.
agree.
We're just gonna go with what we agreed to at town meeting 6 years ago,
Yeah.
right? Like, I'm not sure I agree with that.
Yeah.
But that's new information, and I wasn't aware that
just,
we're literally
So
still in flux
reining
over
this
town meeting.
reining this into capital planning. So before we rezone and do all the property lines, do you understand at least where we're
I
coming
do,
from? Okay.
absolutely.
And I would recommend that when you get these new numbers for the parking lot that was proposed, and then this alternative, if you're getting that price, that get reviewed, not necessarily by the capital planning, depending on when it comes in, but certainly it can be, through the select board, like I said, through ARPA or a special article afterward or something like that.
And Heather, if it were pulled together quick enough, it could be a separate article, even an annual town meeting, if there's funding available for it.
Yeah.
If town manager decides there is funding, a funding source for the project. This has nothing to do, well, it will with the plans coming forward. I just mentioned to Heather that the ownerships of the lots along Main Street need to be corrected on that plan. There's an error
On what plan?
between, on the plan that you sent to us,
For the parking lot?
I believe it wasn't the patio, right? Yeah, it was the parking lot. If you expand that out, it identifies the property ownerships on Main Street, the town of Lunenburg, Saxon's. In between Saxon's and the town of Lunenburg, there's a Marshall-owned property, and it's not on that plan. Owned by somebody Marshall.
Wherever they grabbed it from.
Right, I'm not sure where they grabbed it from, but I've been on the Jones property. I know there's a stake there, and actually part of their property, not part of their property, part of our property, they're using. And the arborvitae's were put up just as a privacy screen.
To who? Who was using it?
Marshall's,
Oh,
In the
yeah,
Jones
yeah,
house.
yeah.
It's the Jones House property that's
which
not.
is
Thought-
fine, you
thought about
know, but it's,
Okay.
but I agree, that back lot that runs behind the old church there, I think there's questions where that line is run to. And I can't seem to see anything back there.
They need to waive adverse possession.
Yeah,
Well, you can't have adverse possession against the town. That doesn't work. Wait,
All right.
people, that's
Eminent
true.
domain.
That's
No,
a true
no,
statement.
I know.
Eminent domain.
I'm dealing with that up north.
It's only, you can only lose it if you're a private person, which I don't understand either.
that's interesting.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Can't see
Okay.
that.
Okay.
Adverse possession.
I appreciate you both coming in, sharing that with us.
So if we can submit as soon as there are members, we could submit at any time to you?
Not to this, not to capital planning, but through the
To
town
select
manager
board.
and then select board, yeah, yeah.
Select board.
Because of the ARPA, right, yep. One of the town manager, like was said, could put a separate article on it. I mean, if it came in before that, we could meet in an emergency if something came up. But generally, that's not been done in the past, but if it came in January, we can potentially convene.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so now we are on the full rating. Now we have Mr. Brenner's numbers. We have the ability to look at these however we want and rank. Well, let's go to the other column and we'll go to the other sheet here. And the other sheet actually has the ranking with the formula. So this is an average of everybody's. I guess the first thing to do is there was talk about removing the Flat Hill drainage construction and making it unrated. And we put that on hold for last meeting, and for discussion now, that is right here. So if we don't want to rate it, probably we should address that.
Well, one thing that, where you have some people rating it and some people not, the numbers become somewhat askew as a result of that. Well, it's gonna be very low anyway, so it probably doesn't matter.
Well, it's 17, it actually comes,
Yeah.
it's an average.
Well, that's just it, right? So if I were to put it, I think mine came to 27 or 28 items.
And it's averaging
It's averaging
It's averaging
zero.
by the number, no, because they're blanks, it's not. It would change enormously if we put these as 30s.
Oh, I see, right,
But because they're blank, it's only averaging 3 numbers.
right.
So it's 46, 51, yeah, that's why it's, yeah, that's why.
So we have to
that's
make
why
a
it's
decision one way or the other and then fill in a number.
Right. So I don't know if anybody wants to make such a motion or not.
I would move that we not rate the Flat Hill project.
Sorry.
Any further discussion?
Mr. Brenner, you got this high, rated high, so.
Yeah, so, No, I apologize. I didn't have the opportunity to review the last meeting on YouTube, and we don't have the minutes yet, so.
So
if I could get, yeah, the dime store.
The Reader's Digest version is, first of all, this is engineering and construction, but the point is that the rest of the committee felt that before we could engineer it, we would have to have kind of a back of a napkin plan about where are we planning to put all this water to begin with. What are we engineering? Like, nobody has identified, there's no town property nearby, and if it's going to be close by, it would have to involve getting some agreement with a landowner. Otherwise, we're looking at the nearest, back in the day, a year or 2 years ago, they talked about carting it a mile away to Page Street. And that's a huge project. So without knowing what the overall plan in a broad sense is, what are we engineering? That's what the consensus was. And if anyone wants to add to that.
Yeah, I mean, the water's gotta go downhill somewhere, right? So where's it going?
Again, and we've had versions of this discussion in the past. My pushback would be that I feel like engineering can inform us what can be done with the water. We're making a lot of assumptions I feel strongly for a group of people who, to my knowledge, are not engineers with the appropriate background to feel confident in that. I know I don't have the appropriate background, at least. I'm really not thrilled with a $250,000 project that is like, oh, this is engineering and construction, and because we guess this is what it will be. I'm also really sensitive, and the reason it's ranked high for me is I'm extremely sensitive to the residents who are being impacted by the current issues. And I would really like to see forward momentum rather than yet another year of it just not being addressed. And that's why I have it ranked high. I'm not thrilled with so many aspects of this, but I want to see something happening because.
So my view on this is that forward momentum would be, and I understand your point about the engineering aspect of this, right? But has there been a serious discussion about easements with abutting landowners to move that water downhill? Like, in my mind, that is a more relevant near-term progress than what I consider to be a wild goose chase for $250,000 that, by the way, could very well land us on your $250,000 bought you a $2 million plan to move water someplace that also isn't feasible, right? So I'm just worried about throwing good money at bad here. And in my mind, not an engineer, got a B in high school physics, still nobody has told me that water flows uphill. So, until we get somewhere between that and something that makes sense in my mind, like, I can't get there.
And I would, for the similar reasoning that we just talked about with the Eagle House parking, I am also sensitive to that. I am just as behind that project. I am behind this. I am the select board member that keeps wanting to fix this problem, but I also have to, there's a separation, there's a dichotomy between, yes, it's a high priority I want fixed, but do we have enough to go forward to begin fixing it? Because we can't just throw money at something. We need somebody to come up with and say, here are 3 possibilities, and now I'm going to fund a study or an engineering study to look at those 3 possibilities. Right now, I don't know what those possibilities are.
Yeah.
And what I question is who are those somebodies? I mean, who owns this?
The town owns the issue, and we have to work with our engineers.
Right.
Not at this level. I mean, I've got to have.
But does this fall within the scope of a town board that talked about easements and?
Well, the select board owns the roads. So they ultimately own it.
Well, we own the problem because it affects the road. This has to be resolved because it affects the roads, because it makes the roads dangerous.
Right.
And it also erodes and undercuts the roads, which makes them expensive to upkeep. So, because it's DPW, it falls under the town manager and the board of selectmen.
And we have been working with
Yes.
the butters
Yep.
and landowners on that road, so.
So what we need to do, one of the things I don't think we have that we need probably to do is discuss what is the volume of water we are talking about? Are we talking about a small retention pond full of water? Are we talking about we're gonna create a pond? Are we gonna create a lake? I mean, how much water is coming out of here that's going down the road? And that will obviously inform what kind of design we need.
Was there any information from that study that we funded that even throws a stone at that?
There's recommendations on certain things that should be looked at for on private property as one of the first steps.
But in terms of like volume and flow rates and those kinds of things, is there?
I don't recall.
Yeah, I don't recall the
No.
flow rates and that kind of.
The initial charge
Yeah,
was,
it was-
the engineers were asked to look at the village at Flat Hill and the retention pond that was built there, and is it being maintained, or is it ineffective because it's not being maintained? And while they said it's, they recommended some things that the village of Flat Hill and that homeowners association need to do, they also indicated that even if those were done, that's not gonna solve what they believe is a high water table issue in the whole area, but it would do well to do some of it.
Right.
But there were no volumes, and that's what I think we need to know.
Tom, if I could, through you to the town manager, and I need to make sure I didn't create this comment in my head, but at the last meeting, I have recollection that as we ended the conversation about this same item, that you made a statement that you agreed with us that it was premature to move forward with this project.
Yes.
Okay, so
Yep.
I just wanted to reiterate that so that.
So that was the reason.
Yeah. So we have a motion on the
We
floor in
do.
a second.
Yep. Any other discussion? So all in favor of not rating this?
And this is a simple majority, correct? Okay, very good.
Please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Okay, so 4-1, it passes, so I'm going to remove, I'm not gonna remove it, I'm just gonna remove the readings of people who
We're
voted.
probably gonna have to recast Mr. Brenner's math though now.
Right.
Or actually anyone who,
Does a single number shift, I mean, I guess it, depending how tight things are, could impact.
yeah.
Um,
What it does is it negatively affects anything that you rated below that.
Yeah,
Well, we could raise, what did you rate it at again?
it was 5.
So, yeah, so we can bump up everything by 1 if we need to.
Yeah.
If it's going to make a change.
I'm not convinced that, well, I mean, we can look and see how
Yeah.
tight things are up here, if that quarter point would really matter on things.
Now, there were some changes that people made in their rankings. Did you make changes?
I did make a
Okay,
few.
so do you want to review quickly what those changes were?
If I could even remember them. So I had the cemetery items as separated. So 17, 18, and
Right here.
19, which was the rear floor covering.
Yep.
So those got basically changed to put 17 and 18 together.
Okay.
And that was an error that I had made last week. Because I did do the, and I actually wound up reversing the priority of the headstone and the turf when I did that.
For this,
Because the town manager had recommended that the headstones come before the turf.
We'll delete that notes column for this purpose of this.
I think that was the only, I think those were the
And
only
I am
changes.
going to delete the first column, so that when we reformat these, we don't need these. That's not what I wanted. Okay. So here we are. Mr. Martin, do you want to review what changes you made in yours?
Okay, so I went from a rating of 0 just to set of numbers.
Mhm.
And so my first one was the turf field feasibility study. I made that a 24.
Yep, right there,
And then the flatter road drainage, well, that's gone now.
right?
So the next one will be the senior center parking lot. I made it a 26, which would really be a 25 if you.
Okay, that's
Yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah.
And then the Brooks House, the exterior doors, 27. The Brooks House window repairs, 28. The Brooks House gutter repairs, 29. And the Brooks House Vertex, 30.
How do you have 30 and I only have 27?
I don't know, I started pushing earlier.
There are 30.
Hmm.
So I found out
I
I
think
only
we
got
all
to 29 and I realized I had two of the same number and I finally caught it.
Okay.
So, the changes I made in mine were that I re-ranked the Ritter building painting. I ranked it a little bit lower because it was, I didn't realize, I hadn't properly remembered that it was interior, not exterior, but so it changed from 11 to a 15. The abatement, I moved a little bit lower in TC Passios. The public safety downspouts then took the 11th spot that was in the Ritter building painting. And the senior center parking, I put down as the lowest, 29, because I
For
had
what
not
it's
read
worth, I
it.
just saw my double number, which is gonna create havoc when I change it, so we'll kind of see where we're.
So, if anybody wants to talk about anything, we can view what this ranking is, if anybody wants to see it now.
I think we should look at the ranking and kind of see where we land.
Okay, so here's where we go. Hello, where's the, why isn't it choosing the column for me?
You should just be able to
But,
click
yeah.
on the arrow by complete ranking or composite ranking.
Yeah, the down arrow.
Right here?
Yeah.
And it goes,
Ooh, down Karen. Stop monitoring me here. I appreciate it.
IT talk.
So we just want to sort it by that? By
Ascending.
ascending, right?
Yeah.
There you go.
I do want a technical drawing, so
I
that's
got
not, oh, yeah, I can't see that.
So, the exterior Turkey Hill Elementary School exterior door upgrades is the highest with a ranking of 4. Just a little bit higher, the rescue, fire department rescue 1 is 4.2. Turkey Hill security upgrades, 4.4 is 3rd. The primary school security upgrades is 5.4 is 4th. The 6-wheel dump truck, plow truck, number 1 is 5th, that's with a 6 rating.
Which one is that? That the,
That's a 6-wheel, there are 2 6-wheel dump.
okay, that's one of the 2 6
Yep.
ones. Okay, got it, yeah.
Then, instead of the second one being there, the radio system snuck in with a 7.4. Then the second 6-wheel dump spreader plow truck is number 7, with an 8.4. Then the elementary school upgrade of the fire alarm system is 8. The crew cab, the 1-ton, a half-ton, sorry, 4-wheel drive crew cab pickup is 9. The public safety downspout repairs is 10. The Northfield culvert is 11, that's tied with the downspouts with 12.2. The cemetery turf restoration is 12.8, is number 12. The TC Paseo sidewalk repair is number 13. The TC Paseo's Ansel inspection is the halfway point at number 14. Well, not number, no, that's just before halfway. The halfway point is a school pickup truck with plow and sander with a 15.8. It is ranked 15th. The parks, the well and lake treatment is tied with the Ritter Building floor covering replacement at 16 and 17. McNally Park is 18. The installation of the 3M window safety film is 19. Cemetery headstone restoration is 20. The TC Paseos abatement testing is 21. The turf field feasibility study, 22. The Ritter Building painting, 23. TC Paseos plumbing upgrade, 24. The 4 Brooks House projects, the roof and gutter repair is 25. The exterior doors is 26. The senior center parking lot is 27. The Brooks House porch and fire escape is 28. And the Brooks House window repairs is 29. This is the Collins scores. So there are some sprinklings of, there's one like the public safety downspout is rated high with only a score of 17. Then there's one like the TC Paseos abatement testing is a 47. It's the highest one that's rated the lowest.
Yeah, I understand that, though.
No, I understand
Yeah.
the reasoning. I'm just,
So,
it's not terribly askew from that.
so I'm just looking at outliers. I mean, when I look at, let's just take, for example, the Ritter floor covering replacement,
Yep.
and think of that relative to the next 2 items below it. I just, I understand that the floor covering is probably, of all the things to be done in Ritter, is probably will be the least affected by the changes that could ultimately be made to this building, so I understand that. But relative to the other items around it, just from a priority standpoint, I just find it to be difficult. Also in terms of just how many people they'll serve relative, like McNally Park is important to the town, it's important to the Little League, it's, obviously there's the safety issues with the window film, and I understand that there's some controversy there, but I don't know, that one just strikes me. The other one, just, because I think it'll be on the bubble, again, we're not talking about funding, but ultimately, it's where the line is drawn and what gets funded and what's not. What do you call the guy, last guy in his class at medical school? Doctor, right? So, the middle school, high school turf issue is something that is getting progressively worse every year, right? It's measurably worse every year. So if we don't fix that, the serviceability of that area continues to degrade. And at some point, we're gonna have engineering tape going across those bleachers and say you can't use any of that space. When that'll be, I don't know. But, you know, there's gonna be direct effects on people in town that rely on services. And, you know, so again, that was my initial reasoning in terms of a lot of this was safety and number of people that it benefits, right? And so some of these I think are problematic. So much so that I vote against it, I don't know, but.
Well, there are a couple of outliers, as you said, but for the most part, I'd say that, you know,
I'm comfortable with the way it's set up, but if I were to move anything, it would only be one or two of them, maybe up one, down one, so on and so forth. The general flow of the list I'm comfortable with. I would like to ask one more question in an open meeting, just so I get a clarification in my head, because I think the description, again, is misleading unless I misunderstand, and that is the Whalen Lake
Yes.
treatment. If I could have that repeated by the town manager as to what properties that money is going to be expended on.
Thank you, Dave. That is a correction in the title. It should read Whalen Lake and Marshall Ponds.
this one right here?
Yeah.
Yes.
It's preliminary for both locations. There's another capital request in future year that is just for Marshall Pond, because it's a much larger expense.
Right. Heather, is treatment an appropriate
It's,
ranking or description of what the work that's going to be done, or is it more going to be, as I think you mentioned at one point, is there another more appropriate word that really describes what work is going to be done with this money is what I guess what I'm trying to ask? Or is it just, you want to leave it general as working towards the treatment of those two?
yeah,
Water
leaving
lines.
it general. 'Cause
Okay, that's fine, I get it.
So can you refresh my memory on
It was,
Marshall Pond in particular? There's two phases to that?
right, there's, it's a sonar phase before the hydro raking happens. Yeah, so there's the initial,
I just don't
It's just-
recall.
What's Marshall Pond used for?
Skating.
Basically ice skating now, but with water improvements and removal of the, I don't know how to describe it, but the aquatic life that is built up in that pond over the years. It could be cleaned up enough so that it would be appropriate for car top access. Well, they got the access already, but kayaking, canoeing, potentially fishing.
Its lack of treatment and attention has made
It's
it come
pretty
into
much
disuse.
closed up the pond, closed up the water.
Right.
Is that located over where the,
It's a sidewalk, so if you walk, if you're walking down Main Street and you go toward Highland on
Yeah,
the sidewalk.
it's on the
that's-
left?
Yes,
Mhm.
exactly.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's actually part of the Marshall Park parcel.
Right.
That's included in that entire parcel.
So this would be the time, if anybody has a rating change of their own that they would like to change, this would be the time. If you don't, that is fine too.
I am very comfortable. I see the thought process on my data sheet that led to me rating the Ritter Building floor covering at number 1, and it's incorrect, to be frank.
Okay.
So that is not my top priority. I don't feel the need to redo all of mine, but by the same token, I think that I am an outlier there that is pulling that number notably higher than it should be.
Okay.
So I'm fine with moving that down in priority or changing my ranking or however we.
Yeah,
to
well,
do
if
that.
you want to change your ranking, this would be the time to do it. I will do it.
I'm comfortable changing my ranking. I'm comfortable as part of the holistic discussion saying, actually, that should be lower. I don't know the way we handle that, but.
Well, you would just re-rank.
Yeah,
You would re-rank your row,
yeah.
and we'll make whatever changes you want me to make. We'll do it live,
Well,
if you wanna.
rather than going through that effort,
That,
would you suggest, you know, knowing the relative math here, right, which is each number is basically going to be, you know, a quarter of a spot, let's
Yeah.
say, right? Where would you replace that relative to where it is right now?
for me, that would probably fall closer to about 15, so,
Okay.
Well, we can make it a 15.
yeah.
I mean, you can have two 15s.
Okay,
I'm
then
not
I've
asking-
got two 18s, you can have two 15s.
Great, then I would lower, I would put it close, I would put it around 15 for me.
Is that what you want?
No, yes.
Okay.
That's actually probably a more expedient way of doing it.
I'm fine with that approach. I don't wanna.
Yeah.
And actually, that's kind of the process we went through last year.
Oh, is that right?
Once they were ranked, then we, you know, left the ranking numbers alone while we went through the final prioritization and moved them, you know, move it from 11 down to 14 or up to 3 or
put
whatever,
it here.
ignoring the composite ranking.
Yeah.
So that put it as at number 20.
Dropped it a few spaces,
Yeah.
yeah.
And certainly, I don't know how much it matters due to its already high place on the list, but I must have had a transposition error with another one, putting plow truck 2 at 27. Because that should have been notably higher on my, like, reviewing my own priorities, that wouldn't have been where I should have put it. So, I don't know how much it matters because it's already high on the list.
So again, you can,
Yeah.
it's up to you. This will be a document in the
Yep.
public forum. If you want it to be shown that you have it something else, that I understand
I
why.
would-
If you don't want to change it, it's fine too.
Where did I put the other?
So you've got the other one at 13.
Right.
Got the other one at 13? I'm comfortable putting it about the same then. That's fine with me.
Which makes sense.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Plow truck 2 is now ahead of plow truck 1.
We can rename it. Well, it's interesting because plow truck 2 is the new request, plow truck 1 is the older one.
Madam Town Manager, does any of these seem out of whack to you?
I'm having a hard time seeing them.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
I should add a column for a running total, but I'm sure that the town manager and the finance director can do that. I'm amazed that I was able to do this. This is learning by Google.
And
I don't ever
Tom,
work in
for
Excel.
our purposes, the dollar number is really irrelevant.
Right. No, I'd just like to know,
Yeah.
just
No, I
out of our own sake, it's like, okay, if we estimate that it was the same as last, or if it, at $1.5 million, how far does it get us?
But, you know,
Not very far, by the way, because the top ones are.
well, that's exactly the point that I was trying to make, about to make, was that we've front-loaded the more expensive items here.
Well, because they're
Which,
needed.
you know, kind of is what it is.
Right.
But, you know, back to my point around the fiscal edge of this and the ARPA and the special purpose stabilization money and that kind of thing, all of those could ultimately contribute to the line being further down than it would be otherwise. So if we're in that you know, $2.25 million range that, you know, I've speculated will probably land in terms of capital funds, given the trends.
Right.
Then that line is gonna be higher, there'll be fewer items
Yeah.
this year as a result of.
Some years you get bigger ticket items.
Yep.
And I think the other possibility, as you said, Peter, there's other funding sources, but the smaller projects, in general, most of them, it's easier to find a secondary funding project, source for a $30,000 project than there is for a $160,000 project
Yep,
or
that's a fair point.
$250,000 project.
That's a very fair point.
And, you know, also in line with our discussions over the last couple of years, with the expenditures that at some point, if we ever get to an agreement in town, we need to get some of these big ones out of the way now, where we have the funding to do it, because we're gonna need to spend some substantial money in the outlying years to, if we're gonna accomplish what has been identified as the needs for the town as a whole.
Oh, sure.
So, in the world of make-believe prizes, George gets the prize because he gets the closest, his list is the closest to the actual rankings.
I mean, the price is right.
That's it.
Well, dang.
Where's Drew Carey?
Wow, yeah, you're tight.
Wow.
Yeah, his are
Come back
pretty
next
close.
year?
Yes. And you get a plow truck, and you get a plow truck. If everybody's okay with this listing, this will be the one, unless somebody has anything else, that we can vote on this and submit that to the town manager. And I'll send it out to everybody. By the way, Peter, how come you don't have a lunenburgma.gov?
Sounds
Because I work for
okay.
the school committee these days, which is a different domain.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
And at some point, I need to request that those get rationalized for addressee lists, because that is very problematic. When you're trying to email people in the town. From a school side, using Google Mail, all of the lunenburgma.gov addresses have disappeared from the address book. So it's difficult to.
Yeah, instead of
find
making
email
things
addresses.
easier, now I have to remember more.
Yeah, when you're trying to email people on the other side, it's harder.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not on the, office side,
Yeah.
like your addresses don't go there.
Unless anybody has any other changes, I am prepared to make a motion.
Make the motion.
I make a motion that the capital planning committee recommend to the town manager the prioritization of the 29 projects, on the list that is presently on the screen that we have completed the prioritization on this evening.
Do we have a second?
I would second.
Any further discussion? Let's make this a roll call vote. Mr. Beardmore,
Aye.
Mr. Martin,
Aye.
Mr. Passios.
Aye.
Mr. Brenner.
Aye.
And an aye for myself. We will meet probably in the new year, just to meet one time, maybe to review things, give the town manager and the finance director a chance. We'll also have to meet to review some of the minutes. So in fact, we have to get through the agenda here. So let's go through the minutes. Approval of minutes from November 9th and November 21st. Did everybody read those as? So I would entertain a motion on those two sets of minutes.
I would move that we approve the minutes for the capital planning committee meetings on November 9th, 2022 and November 21st, 2022.
For a second.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None? Okay, action items for next meeting. So the only next meeting is going to be to, if there's anything that we want to review, now the town manager, when she gets this, this will also be sent out to everybody in this, on the committee. And then definitely we'll have to meet at least to approve minutes, because I want to get all the minutes that we are responsible for to the town clerk. Do we have minutes from the meetings that we held by phone in the summer? Did anybody take minutes of those? I'll have to speak with you about it.
Yeah.
There were two. You chaired one right before we met in person and reorged.
That was on Zoom and recorded.
Was it recorded?
Should have been.
Okay, so we should ask
I mean,
Amanda to look at that one then. And then we had one by phone in like August, and we'll have to just, and that was just.
Did I miss that one? It must have.
No, I
I
don't-
don't
did you?
remember one by phone.
Were you not on it? Well, we talked about, you know, did anything want to change about the Cullen scoring and everything? I thought you were
I
on it.
remember it being on the agenda, and honestly, I'm not
That's fine.
positive at this point.
It wasn't, it was like a 15, 20-minute meeting, so. Okay, so there's no meeting set yet. I will be in touch when we know. And if we get down to public comment, any final public comment from the capital planning committee members?
My only comment is that if there's anything that is asked by the finance committee of me, I will bring it up in that January meeting, unless it's something that's more pressing. Well, they're not gonna meet till January anyway. So, you know, I may have some correspondence back
To
from
which
the
meeting?
finance committee.
Oh, finance, okay.
Yeah, finance is
Okay.
meeting till
Yep.
next year.
Yep.
So I may have some questions and/or something that comes up.
And we will meet also, because Mr. Beardmore had asked, and I think all of us, we didn't take a vote specifically, but we all agreed in principle that we would write our own report. for the-
Report, yeah.
Any other members? I want to thank all of you for being a really good committee and everybody showing up prepared and going through this and having good discussions. I want to thank everybody for that. It really worked well. Any public comment from the public? Rhonda?
Rhonda Lucio, 181 Reservoir Road. I just wanted to thank the committee as well for allowing me to sit in and listen to all the debate and participate. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for being continually interested.
Ditto.
Anybody else? Okay, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye. Aye, opposed, none. Wish everybody a very Merry Christmas, Happy Holiday, et cetera, and a safe, healthy New Year.
Same.